Nice. So, what's up, Sam? Glad you could hop on, join us. Man, as always, I just want to know sort of where you're at, what's going on in your room, what you've been working on. Yeah, just give me the lowdown. What's happening right now for you?
Yeah, cool. So it's been a bit slow recently, which is kind of good in a way. We don't have a huge class in the mornings, and so I suppose a big class for us would be sort of 7, 8, which is good for me. I consider myself a beginner coach.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very early on in the journey coaching in general, but yeah, at the moment we've got it's leading into winter over here, or starting to come into the cooler months, and so we sort of see around this time of year a bit of a drop off. So, um, but the good thing is we're able to sort of really tailor our coaching, or my coaching, and yeah, it's been good. I look after the morning classes, or the morning sessions. So I'll look after probably 3 to 4 out of the 5 days per week. The other two, I let one of my friends, Aaron, he looks after one of them. He's been sort of following me into the CLA approach, whereas Tom, he takes the Monday classes, and I kind of leave him to do the old school IP, the traditional sort of method. He's a little bit less traditional in that he takes a different approach, but he's still very much prescription to a solution. Now go find the solution, rather than the other way around. So yeah, it's been a fun journey. I'm not sure how much you've seen of the YouTube channel, but yeah, I essentially started the YouTube channel literally just to review my own stuff. So try and take a bit of a scientific approach in inverted commas. Like all good science, it's based on my opinion. But yeah, I literally started it so that I could go back and look at what I thought back then. Was listening to your videos pretty much to CLA. Um, yeah, it was. I think there's this. I wrote a blog in December. Sorry, a blog at the end of November, and by the start of December, I'd started the CLA approach, and the blog was sort of saying, I'm not too sure about my coach Alex. I'm not too sure about him talking about this gamification. I'm all about systemization, and I was putting together spreadsheets and all this kind of stuff, and within 2 weeks of sort of discovering a couple of Greg stuff, but your stuff, and a few others, and then listening to Rob Gray and listening to the podcast, so I was like, no, this is the reason why there's a whole heap of holes in my game, and this is what I need. This is how I need to plug them. And I started pretty much. I started to use these, and as I said, I kind of immersed myself in a whole heap of the literature. I've got all the books here sitting with me now. I'm like trying to get through this one. Um, Reading papers upon papers, and I'm no academic by any stretch, but I've got a good grasp of language, and this was one of the reasons why I sort of took it on so strongly, was because I was looking at my progress, and thinking I should be a lot further along than I am, and I couldn't quite figure out why. And then I realized that, particularly through when I started looking at sort of internal versus external language, and I put on the Discord asking you about I think it was Gabby Worth or something like that, that Ed was talking about. I'm really interested in sort of any connections you have there, but um, there was just something that was said about external language and destabilization, and it just clicked with me that, for years I'd been told, move your hips. Well, what does that mean? You know, what does that mean? Like, I am moving my hips. Give me a break. Like, what do you want me to do with it? And then people would give me their concept of what moving the hips meant, and so I'd try and do what their concept was, but it always just felt like there was a little man in my head sort of getting in the way. And yeah, and after sort of looking at this thing of, external language, how can I affect them? It started to remove my reliance on techniques, and I started to realize that I was not seeing the forest for the trees, basically. And
Hmm.
it got to a point where I was in flow. So here's another thing that I've been interested since even before I kind of got really interested in it for jujitsu. I was interested, and martial arts in general. The idea of getting into that moving meditation, doing stuff without having to think about it, and just responding, And I think that the CLA and, ecological dynamics really sort of fits so well with that. That yeah, it was something that was just so powerful for me, and I was just getting into flow so much easier. Every single class, I was just into flow, and then Christmas hit, and I had to take some time off. But that's how I kind of started that journey. So
Yeah, you know what's interesting here is there's so many, one, of course, like benefits as like a practitioner, just like when you start adopting it and you see it in your room and you start to experience.
mm,
But just the way you understand jiu-jitsu or grappling, when you have to start doing things, really like the external language, I found for me was one of the biggest things because there's so many terms that we use that really have like a couple layers of unpacking that you would
mm,
have to do. Like when I say like, off balance you, what does that mean? Like we can say what it means. Okay, what does that look like? Does that
mm,
look like they fall over? Is that an off balance? Or is it that I can just make a person take a step? Or I can make their arms leave their side for a moment? Or like all these things. So for me, like the external language is probably the biggest thing because now I'm
mm,
finding, what I used to be sort of caught up in like the minutia of like how to create an effect didn't really matter. It just mattered, can I describe the effect that we want to create in the simplest way that can make sense, immediately. And that's like a process of refinement, as I'm sure you know, because it sounds like you were coming from like a more like systematic, thinking and process. So I'm sure a lot of what you were already doing was like, do ABC to get here.
yeah,
Now we're sort of like that middle area, the ABC, is not really even the important part anymore. It's where are we trying to get, and it's up to you to figure out how or how we're trying to do. So for you, when it came from being like systems driven, let's say, what was the biggest challenge for you to sort of unpack what you had already like sort of adopted and like communicate it to your room?
yeah. That's a good one. I think I was really lucky in that I found it as early on in my coaching journey as I have,
Mm-hmm.
because I was already coaching, but we were coaching from a perspective of trying to get concepts in. So I think the biggest thing for me was the effect, like making the effect happen to the person, and getting that across to, like getting that across to my people. Like, I'd try for years. I think it was a really easy transition for me, and the reason being is because, for half guard, for example, trying to get my guys to do an underhook, right, and just, it's something that I repeatedly say, like, just get an underhook. You just need to get your arm up, and get the underhook, and they couldn't get it. Well, a couple of the guys just weren't getting it, and they would always just get under in just the most ridiculous fashion. It was like, how are you not getting that this is crushing you down, and all you need to do is get to your side, and get the underhook. And then one day I just said, well, try and get your arm over the back and grab the back, grab his lat. So grab the opposite side lat, and that external language just it happened for him, and they were already on their side. I didn't need to tell them that to get on their side. That they were already doing these things just through this one simple goal, and I got like there were so many times where I just got so excited because I could see that things that I had step by step these guys through for the past year, they were getting within seconds of just a simple goal and executing that goal. So for, that was that kind of transition was easy. I'd like to say that I think there was about, I'd say 2 to 3 months though, where my coach Alex was talking about this games thing, and I wasn't really on board with it because I'd been, I've been, as I said, mapping things out by spreadsheets and trying to put, YouTube videos together, and then realizing that there's a variation upon a variation upon a variation upon a variation, and someone does it differently, and someone does it differently, and it, in my head, I was thinking, well, obviously I've got to learn all these variations, and I think that's where, when the penny dropped, it was like, I don't worry about any of that, you know, and so I think the going to sort of seminars as well, like I go to all these seminars, and they it'd be a snapshot, that they'd be looking at, and it's like, yeah, but what's the underlying? And Aaron and I have spoken for years about there has to be an underlying concept behind all these techniques, and finding these concepts through individual techniques. I mean, it eventually happens, and I know that it does because that's how those who have come before us have got there. But I don't know who said it, and I'm sure it's someone in the space. But they've said, like, we brag about a black belt taking 10 plus years,
Mm.
and we've had how many decades of exposure now to Brazilian Jiu Jitsu or grappling as a whole. I mean, hundreds of years in reality, but we're still bragging about it taking 10 plus years to become a black belt. Like, it's when you look at it from that perspective, you're like, yeah, why aren't we modernizing our training techniques? Why aren't we, doing better for our students and learning and trying to improve? And that's what I really liked about sort of how Greg approached things, and how you've done things, and you're trying to learn as much as and I'm trying to learn, and that's something that's really helped me out heaps, is just getting back into this learning phase where I'm like, I'm learning. I'm trying to get things from all different areas and bring it in to make the best possible learning environment that's possible.
Right. One thing that's interesting is you talk about how there's like that point of prestige or status, like, oh, it takes 10 years to get a black belt. Or
Mm.
for me, it takes, even longer, or it's so hard. Like the level has to be super, super high. It's so interesting to me because that to me, lots of time just sounds like you're doing it for the sake of being able to say that thing. Because if we were to really think about it, we all know that you would love if your students were killers faster. Like
Mm.
no one would disagree with that. Like that is the goal, but then we still have some arbitrary things where we're like, can I really make this guy a blue belt yet? He's only been training for this long. Or like,
Mm.
these really weird ideas. But in every sport, people get better faster generation over generation.
Mm.
There's sports that we clown where it's like, oh, it only takes you like 2 years to get a black belt in whatever, Taekwondo or something like that. But at some point in the timeline, it took way longer.
Yeah.
Same thing with like judo. Like, and now it can be sort of like, if you're on an accelerated track, maybe it can be done. But it used to take longer because there just wasn't information. There just wasn't coaching. There wasn't infrastructure for people to go out there and challenge themselves and compete, or at least just connect with other practitioners in the way they can. So it should be just like intuitive that it should take less and less, and it should be a faster and faster timeline.
Yeah, kind of like
One
a
thing I
rising
find
tide.
Yeah, but one thing I
Mm,
find hilarious is, most instructors will tell their students to have like a white belt mentality. Keep that
mm,
white belt mentality, always be a learner, always be, searching and exploring. But like when it comes to their own instruction or the way they coach,
mm,
they tend to be sort of stuck in the ways because they've worked,
yeah,
which is incongruent in the most basic way you can say it, right? That just doesn't line up with really what you're trying to espouse to your students. That forever student mindset, it should apply on the coaching side. The one great thing I love about all the eco conversation is I think it's actually moving people to start realizing that there's a whole different part where they have to be that student, which has to be like the big benefit, because what's going to happen for everyone when everyone is just worried about getting people better and making a practice environment that is more conducive to learning. Because you also see a lot more discussion now of people being concerned about things like practice room culture, you know, all the little elements that lead into making like a good program. Because before, a good program used to be, do I have three killers and it doesn't matter what the average level of the room is. Whereas
mm.
now you see more of the conversation sort of moving towards like, how good can I make this 40-year-old guy off the street, or this, like it's really cool to see that shifting, and just sort of moving along. For you, it sounds like you're young in your coaching journey, so you don't have like any like baggage, let's say, resting on results behind you, which sort of gives you freedom, which I find for a lot of people is maybe one of the biggest limitations, is this like lack of freedom to do stuff the new way or totally experiment, or because we're sort of caught up in what's been working and like keeping the status as it is just to move things along. For you,
It's
I'm just
funny you
thinking
say that.
like, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's funny you say that because I won't say which franchise. Like people will know the community at the moment small enough that they probably won't know which one it is. But we're actually there's been a bit of a shift within the head office guys that look after everything, and they're looking to bring in someone from the traditional mindset as our head coach and this and that. So it's a case of, and I've got to be careful with what I say here, Kabir, just for the next couple of months at least.
Mm.
But I've found that it's weird because I've been working within this sort of my coach has been the guy that's created the programs for the franchise and this and that. And then they've sort of shifted this thing, and it's like, okay, well, we're actually going to go with these guys from out of town. They're actually Brazilian. They're actually uh, high level. They have that mentality of like, well, what champions have you produced? What are your what are you like? What can you put to the world stage? They can't have a black belt because they haven't got any titles. That kind of mentality, and it's like I got in this to one of the reasons why I hooked up with my coach is we've got the same thing. We love jujitsu, we love grappling. We want to spread it to as many people as possible in the best way possible. You know, so being kind of like downshifting back to this thing of like we are from the source. We disseminate to our people what is actually the what is actually perfect jujitsu. It's just not something that I'm really a big fan of at all. Like I got into jujitsu initially because it was a test and measure martial art. People tested, like they went and tried stuff and then took it to an actual fight and and saw whether it worked. And if it didn't, it was no longer something that they used. So yeah, it's. I mean, I've been to some of these 4, 5, 6 degree seminars, and some of them are. Don't get me wrong. Like I've been to some where they do teach like a bit more of an underlying concept, and you can see that they're no longer bound by that. Warm up. You know, talk for 40 minutes, do some dead drills, dogma sort of thing. But some of them that I've been to recently, I'm just like, why am I why am I spending my money? You know, I mean, I get it back on tax, but why am I spending this money? You know, like I could go and look at where some, roll with someone high level or much higher level than I am, identify that I'm getting stuck, and then play games around that where I'm getting stuck. I think that's, you know,
Hmm.
you mentioned yesterday with Ed, well, Ed and yourself, sorry, yesterday, whenever you did that chat, that we're kind of almost like coaching ourselves out of a job in some ways. Eventually, your guys can go and teach themselves, and I think that's how I see it as well. Like, I suppose one of the reasons why I sort of jumped into it as well was I was looking at, oh yeah, actually, whenever whenever I found a hole in my game as a high, a high sort of blue, low purple, when I found a hole in my game, I'd just go away and play a few games on it and get comfortable with that one particular thing, And yeah, sorry, I rambled on a bit there.
No, you're perfect. I do want to ask. So, you have a situation where you have your own school, you're part of another organization, and you have, and I think a lot of people have this thing where they have something they want to implement, but they might not have the full control to really steer the ship in the direction they want. How do you plan to navigate that? What's your pitch? How do you, like, I'm just
Good
curious
question.
because so many people are in that position where they know
Yeah,
they have something that's going to be good for the team, good for the community, good for the students, probably in some ways, if refined enough, good for business too.
mm.
Um, and I'm sure you've thought about it. So, like, what's your, how are you going to take your go at this?
Yeah. Look, initially, so I don't call them classes because top down. The thing is if you're teaching classes, then you have to be instructor certified by this. So, like, I don't teach classes. I hold workshops because that's essentially what I'm doing. I'm not teaching a class like that. I'm essentially holding a practice. I'm designing that practice around the theme of the week, or the theme of what we're doing. I'm not sure how much you've seen of how I do run my classes, but I run it around the theme, and I call it a workshop. And at the moment, there's nothing definitive, as in you have to do this, but it's coming. I know it's coming, and there is, to be to be brutally honest, there is an opportunity for me and my business partner and coach to actually get out. He's potentially looking to get out of the space at the moment, not out of coaching altogether, but
Mm.
yeah, again, I'm trying to keep sort of some things close to my chest here, Kabir. But ultimately, I am looking to. I have a 5-year plan basically. So I've used the last sort of 5 years. We took it over in the middle of COVID.
Mm.
Not sure if that was. I'm not sure what it was like over there, but we had sort of pretty draconian lockdowns where you couldn't leave your house, and if you got caught, even you know, even in a thing where you could be in a workplace where you could be separate, let alone be, you know, on top of someone, literally. So, it was, there was kind of, we took it over during that. We've built it up. I've learned a whole heap about operation of a gym, which is great. That's something I needed to know. In hindsight, if you'd asked me 2 years ago, I would have said I wouldn't have taken it on when I did. But since then, it's been we've made a really good business out of it. As I said, 5 years. I got a 5-year sort of time frame. I will be looking probably next year, so I reckon that will be when that sort of ban hammer will come down from on high and say no, you can't even do your workshops.
Mm.
When that happens, I will create my own little separate entity. I've already got something in the works where I'm kind of offering. free sort of consults as such. Not even I don't even like the idea of seminars or anything like that. But that's how our space works. It's about seminars and guest instructors and that sort of thing. So um, you know, potentially that's something that initially I'll keep going. I've got the morning class is pretty it's pretty, or morning workshop is pretty consistent and pretty tight. So I should be able to make something with that. Um,
Hmm.
it's up in the air at the moment, but yeah,
So you won't really try to even sway them on their thinking about the way things should be done. You feel like it's probably
we
like a
have tried.
non-starter.
Kabir, we have tried.
What's the
Honestly,
big pushback that you hear?
essentially, no, we are the source. This is how we've always done it. I mean, it's that old, the most dangerous words in the English language. This is the way we've always done it, and and I think as well, look, there's a element of looking at the successful gyms, your Alliance, because they're over here, like they're there's these huge, huge gyms that have, they're like I don't know much about any other gym, so I'm not. I hope I'm not sort of speaking out of turns, but you got to wear the gi, you got to wear the rashi, you got to wear this, you know everything's monetized, like gradings monetized, this and that. I never want to go down that track, but there's this thing of, yeah, well, that's how you make a successful gym, and I mean, look, it's how some karates have made their way. It's how some people, some organizations make their way, and some parents really love that kind of thing. We're the franchise that I'm a part of. We're one of those ones which is very kid friendly. We're clean. We're not that kind of hardcore garage dojo sort of thing. We're definitely like mats cleaned after every session, like there's nice seats for the parents, that kind of that. It's not, you could step either way. You could step to the modern way, or you could step to the more traditional and be like, and that's kind of where I think they're going, and that's fine. Like, if that's going to work for that franchise, then awesome, great. I'm not I'm not going to fight it. And then when that ban hammer does come, I'm able to sort of shift. I'm not gonna say to anyone, you have to come with me. Like, I'm hoping that I've got enough. I mean, I've had my old gym. So years ago, I was training at this other gym. There's a whole story there as well. But that gym ended up folding in with mine because we were in similar areas. And I mean, there's a whole heap of other stuff before that. What do you call it? Controversy and that sort of thing. I won't go into that though. But that's a story for when I'm a much older man and my beard which is strangely looking extremely grey at the moment. But yeah, it's you know these gyms that are around, they can take their own path. I want to take I want to take it down this track, and I want to get better at this. I'm actually interested and I've been asking this, and I think I've been asking it in a really terrible way. But are there any? I've got the Rob Gray's the ecological dynamics, constraints led approach information, but are there any other sort of psychological tracks that you know of? Any sort of subjects or topics that you've been interested in, that you've applied to your classes? The reason why I ask, I'll sort of pump the brakes a little bit here, is I've spoken about getting into the zone and flow states. This was something that was, so interesting to me. And just as a little plug, I've potentially got a really, really cool interview with, I won't say the name just yet, we haven't booked it in, but with someone akin to the Ian Renshaws and the Michael
Mhm.
Maloneys. So I've got a chat about flow states with regards to CLA and ecological dynamics coming up. But that was something that interested me so massively was the concept from Csikszentmihalyi. The 8 characteristics, they just fit with what CLA does for you. And there was a book called The Rise of Superman by Stephen Kotler. If you get the chance to read that, it's an awesome book. Like, it appeals to me because I used to skate, and there's a heap of stuff around extreme sports,
Mhm.
particularly some of the high level skaters, and how they used flow to get these to get these massive tricks and all this kind of thing. But the interest that I had with flow was from, funnily enough, like something like The Last Samurai. So there's where he says, "Too many mind, no mind," you know,
Mhm.
and it's you know, moving meditation, that sort of thing. I'd done traditional martial arts for years and years and years, never got any of it, and then 3 months into jujitsu, I I did something and I just went, holy shit, like I did that without consciously thinking about it. And that was, that sort of sent me on this, like, how do I get that back? And so I was getting more and more of those. And that's why is there anything, any sort of area that you direct someone to look in, not just down these tracks of EDCLA?
Hmm. I mean, for me, when I think of what I'm trying to look at, a lot of times the biggest thing is all the stuff on culture. Building culture, I think, is like a
Okay.
huge thing because it's a human thing we're doing, right? The relationships you manage, the
Yeah.
way you sort of create the community, the way you set expectations, reinforce them, all of that is a whole really, really deep field in itself.
Yeah.
The tribe and how you manage it, and just understanding that stuff. The
That's cool.
other area I really like to explore is sort of like similar, but like when you look at like what makes a winning program in sports,
Mhm.
so like for me, a lot of reading that I like to do is going to be like biographies of coaches who ran those historic like legacy dynasty style programs because there's all these little undertones from there that you pick up of like what really contributes and what sort of stacked on top of, how does someone win, so many NCAA titles in this span just then become like a powerhouse? Because of course there's recruiting, but there's all these other things. Is it the values? Is it the way that they, that's the thing I find super fascinating. But for me, I've never gotten super like far into the psychological side of things. And when you mentioned flow earlier, it's something that a lot of people actually mentioned to me is one of like the big benefits they've had from introducing more CLA in their room is they'll have like beginners who come to me like, "Oh man, this was the thing that I was really looking for out of martial arts." And I
Mm.
think it's something that we sort of like advertise or espouse as like one of the big things, it's like, "Oh, you learn to get out of your mind and into your body and all this stuff."
Yes.
Sounds like it's your major jam though, something you're very interested in. What's been Yeah, let's talk flow. Tell me a
Yeah.
little bit about what you sort of been really finding of interest here.
Well, I think one of the best things about CLA was that it right from the outset, like as soon as I walk into a class and we start, it's like, okay, I feel like I'm already in flow. Like, even when I'm just talking, I feel like I've, like, what I'm saying, and I think this is because there's the risk of messing up, as a coach. Like, you know we the talking about, like, it's test and measure. This is the reason why I started my coaching journey, or the YouTube channel, was because I wanted to see where I was going wrong as well. Like, and I talk about where I was going wrong. So having this freedom to be like, hey, you're gonna fuck up. Sorry about language, okay? Or yeah,
Absolutely.
all right,
Do
cool.
what you got to
I
do. I don't
didn't
care.
even think of that. It's cool if I fuck up. Like, so. And when I gave myself that freedom, it was like, yeah, because you're going to review it later and you're going to improve on that next time. So right away, I'm like in flow. I'm like, the tasks that I put in play. they're straight away. I'm able to be in flow. I'm able to zone into the people when they're doing stuff in front of me. Um, one of the things that I really liked about my personal journey with it was when I found that I wasn't in flow. So whereas before I was looking for these moments where I was in flow, now I'm looking for moments when I'm not in flow. So when this guy gets in play, that's something where I'm like, oh, that's actually somewhere where I'm maybe not too comfortable, and I need to play a whole heap of games around so that I'm no longer getting in my own way. So it's something that when I find that I'm talking to myself like, oh, I'm stopped. Not necessarily talking to myself, but I get somewhere and it's like, oh, I've hit a wall. Okay, all right, that's something that I like. I kind of choo take a,
Hmm.
f- a photograph of it mentally, and then I come back to it and I'll throw myself into that position. Or luckily, because I'm the guy that designs practice, the next day I'll put that into play. Like for example, we were looking at double ashy, and just working from double ashy, and I found that Aaron was just he'd figured out a way to stop me from doing something by sort of really crowding and pushing over on my hips, and I was too far out to switch over and turn back underneath. Anyway, don't worry about that. But um, I was able to sort of go, okay, snapshot. I'm stuck here. I need to work on this. So being able to then come back through a couple of days later and be like, okay, well, we've got a different theme this week, but on this particular, on the control, I want to be able to get to this particular thing. So yeah, I've found that it's enabled me to, as I said earlier on, seeing the forest for the trees. When you're constantly just looking at each individual tree, you're not seeing that there's this forest that you can run through and experience all the joy. But you're just focusing on these individual trees as they come up. And okay, you might be able to chain together two or three of these techniques and then go, oh wow, that was awesome. But when you don't care about the perfection of that tree, they're
Hmm.
all they're all going to be they're all going to have flaws, and as long as you just see it as like the game, and again, like I like that Ecological dynamics. You know, I love that he's done a whole heap of the thinking for a whole heap of people. I agree with what you guys were talking about yesterday. You know, I actually haven't I've seen that there are resources around the games, but I think that I've looked at it always from an evolution. It's all evolving. It's always evolving. So I can't. And you said it best, I think, where you're talking about your class is going to be completely different to my class. Your relationships are going to be completely different to my relationships. So how can I copy your games? And I think I'm very lucky in the respect that when I have a big class, for me is 6-7 people. That's a huge class, or that's a big class. Whereas I'm normally getting two or three, so I get to work with these people quite closely. So um, yeah, that jumped around a bit there, but yeah.
Man, it's really interesting to think of, that flow state and just being really mindful of like those interruptions to flow as like the
Mm,
big like alert that, hey, this is something that we need to get more comfortable with, dive in here a little bit more. I think for a lot of people, just having that realization that like those are the things you should be looking out for when you're reflecting on your own practice. Now, one thing you mentioned was you started your YouTube to sort of track your coaching journey and, the way you review and evaluate your classes and how your coaching is going. What's that process like for when you're evaluating how your coaching session has been? Is it something structured? Is it just watching tape? Is it asking the students? How do you like to approach that?
yeah, I definitely have a chat with everyone after class. I think I get really excited because I can see that they're that they're improving. Like one of the issues. I don't know if you've had it over there, but people don't. For many years, like early on in my career, we didn't touch leg locks. I got done on my first comp with a straight ankle lock because I'd been told my entire the first 3-4 years that white belts aren't allowed to touch ankles, or touch legs. And then I get done with it and I've gone, hey, what the fuck, And it was a verbal tap because I yelled out, and I was standing up thinking he's DQ because he's gone for ankle locks, So, but we were doing this sort of leg lock fortnight recently. We didn't do anything to do with the leg locks. It was all just defense, clearing the thigh line, I call it, and clearing the knee line, and just not freaking out, because I think the biggest thing is people just immediately freak out, and that's where the issue lies. And I had these guys that had never really done this before, and like 2 weeks later, they're just systematically, or they're just getting the things done to defend against ankle an attack that I'd be maybe doing on them, and they'd be getting it because they weren't freaking out. And I was like, I was stoked, I was so happy. And so I'd have these chats afterwards with them. Sorry, back to I'm jumping a little bit, but back to what you were saying. I'd have a chat. I'll have a chat with everyone afterwards, asking one of the things I was doing well before I got into this was, and I actually got Alex to implement it in class. At the end of class, I get people to think about. So I'd say, what's the biggest takeaway that you've got from today's lesson? It could be something that was done in the technique, or it was just something that you did in your own role, And I was asking that for years because I know that it got people to visualize, and imagery is the best way to recall. So, and it's the best way to imprint memory. So I get people to do that. So at the end of everything, I'll be saying, what's an insight that you got from either this particular game or at the end of the lesson. And then with my YouTube channel, so I'd sort of have a couple of hours. I work full time as well. So I've got I work from home though, so hence the reason why I'm able to do this sort of thing. But I get home, I'd have a think about it, have some lunch, and then I'd sit here. It's still pretty warm right now, but I'd have my shirt off, fan going, and I'd sit down with the some of the templates actually from the constraints-led approach, and I'd sit down with that on the screen, and I think you can actually see it in some of my first classes, first videos. Oh, excuse me, where I did like I looked at the template in depth, and I'd be saying, here's the 3 things that I've done good, 3 things that I've done that I would fix in the next one. And after a while, I sort of internalize that, and it can get a bit. I didn't want to get this sort of real repetition. Here's 3 things that I did, because sometimes it would be 2 of the same thing, or variations on something, or something that I personally got out of it. So, but as a general guide, I'll look at that, at those templates of reviewing my performance as a coach, and then kind of getting excited, seeing what other people are doing, and having a chat to them as well. So I think I did an interview with one of my students on my channel. I'm looking to do an interview with Aaron at some stage. So Aaron's been training alongside with me for better part of a decade now. So probably, I think, coming up to 8 years. So and I'll give him a lot of props. He was sort of massive motivator for me, because he used to literally pick me up in the morning, and we'd go to training sort of four or five mornings a week. So
Right. So you just really you have a pretty good little process there. You're watching film, you're breaking it down, you're asking people, you have some stuff that you sort of measure against. Man, just thinking of your YouTube stuff, you had a pretty dope guest. You had Renshaw on.
yeah.
Tell me, what would you say were some of those big takeaways from that conversation that really, how long ago now was that conversation? It wasn't,
It was about 2 months.
yeah,
So
so from then till now, what really clicked in that conversation for you that you think has made some impacts on how your coaching has went, or at least how you maybe view the room and your role in the room, just, yeah, let
yeah,
me know a little bit about that.
yeah. I think I jumped on that interview a bit too early in my journey, to be honest. I hadn't had many conversations online. This is probably maybe the fourth podcast that I've done with someone. So I got really nervous. I had a ton of these questions halfway through. I was kind of a bit frazzled. I don't know. I mean, maybe that didn't show up. Maybe it did. But I think it showed that I was kind of on the right track with a whole heap of things. One of the things that it showed, I really wanted to, weirdly enough, have a chat with Mick Maloney, who was on that call as well. Mick was the PhD student of Professor Ian's. Mick actually was the Olympics, the Australian Olympic combat sports skills acquisition or skills development specialist. So he was part of the judo, I think karate, taekwondo, and boxing, and they brought it all into one location essentially to share their coaching techniques and see if there was a way to better it. And I thought, I didn't even know this until literally you dropped that bombshell on me in the lead up to the conversation with him and Ian. And I think again, I was probably a bit too green when I was asking the questions. But I'd like to have a chat with Mick again and just sort of get some takeaways he got from that experience. With Ian, again, I'd love to have a chat with him as well, but a bit further down the track when I understand it a bit better. I'd literally finished that probably about a week before we had the chat, and it's the first time I've ever sat down with a book and used a highlighter and all that kind of thing. I think since I was maybe 15, 16. I mean, I wasn't, as I said, I'm not an academic by any stretch. I'm not an idiot, but like I literally, I was so excited that I was taking all these notes, and I think maybe I could have got more out of it if I was a bit further, a bit less concerned about looking like an idiot. I think would have been a smarter thing. But one of the issues that I think was touched on, or you've touched on, or one of your guests has touched on, that a lot of this stuff is team sports based,
Mhm.
and so a lot of the advice, like I had kind of a like an idea around the environment. So a lot of the times when the constraints led approach talks about the environment, they're looking at you know size of field and size of the ball that they're playing with and that sort of thing. The opposing players, this and that. Whereas our environment in most cases is our opponent as much as it is the environment. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
Like, I don't know if I'm on the right track with that, but it just feels like our environment is reacting to us as much as we're reacting to it. So it's something I'd like to flesh out more with academics, and I think with this upcoming interview, I'll be able to do it a little bit better because I'll be talking about flow alongside it. But yeah, from a perspective of coaching, I think it was just an interesting conversation. I probably didn't have as much workable understanding at that stage. And I mean, I've started going back through a couple of my videos from sort of last year and going, oh, you know, wow. And Scott actually said that to me. He said, I got a little insecure after our chat because he said, oh, you'll look back on some of your stuff and you'll think, oh, I cringe at that. And I started going, shh, what have I said that he's seen that I should be cringing at, you know? But yeah, I think the biggest takeaway from all of it is it's always evolving. Like you've got to be. I'm actually more involved now as someone that designs a practice, but also like I'm not trying to give a prescription. I'm trying to give the attention where it should be. So a good example was actually yesterday's class. Yeah, yesterday's class. I wanted to we the focus was going to be takedowns, but I do like I do a 20%, and then 60% theme. So we're touching on all three sort of areas of grappling. But we got to the one of the 20%, and because it was one of those situations where it was a small class, there was only three of us. One of the guys, he's a blue belt, he's been training for a while, but he just had his attention focused on the shoulders the whole time, and so it was just stalling. And eventually it eventually didn't work for him, and the stall didn't stall long enough. And so, you know, rather than move on to, hey, we're going to do takedowns now, we sort of went, okay, well, let's really focus in on this. You know, what are you trying to achieve? Where are you trying to go with it? And, why are you trying to stop? Why are you doing this? He told us he's trying to stop the crossface. Okay, but, you know, maybe the goal should be focusing on what are you trying to get rid of? You're trying to get rid of their legs around your hips. Well, maybe try and focus down that area and putting that into play, and then sort of again, evolving the lesson so it focused on the thing that actually made sense.
Can you talk a little bit about the way that you've been building out your themes and your sessions? Just, yeah, give me a high level overview of sort of this planning. 'Cause it sounds like you've been pretty intentional with the 2020-60, but like, what does that look like in a week versus
Yeah,
a
yeah. So
day versus a month? I'm just curious how you try and cover your bases. Because I'm guessing a guy who kicked off this convo talking about loving spreadsheets and stuff like that. I feel like you probably planned this, pretty well, or maybe I'm totally wrong. I just want to hear how you're approaching that side of the coaching.
yeah, cool. So that's great question. And yeah, I the 2020-60 is not like, okay, down to the minute. It's like it's a vibe, it's a feel, It's so what I like to do, I like to kick off a lesson with stand up. So some sort of standing engagement. So we've been doing quite a bit of sort of striking stuff. So the similar to what Scott does, shoulder touch, torso touch. That's evolved as well. That's been really cool and evolving. But a lot of it would be I play a game called the Quidditch, because there's the golden snitch, and the golden snitch is to get any kind of grappling sort of beneficial thing. So usually it's arms clasped around the torso with essentially arms clasped around the torso, or around a singular leg, or you could have your chest on their back in any configuration. Essentially, all the things that a grappler would need to take someone down with, they're at that stage where they take 20%, and then 20% either control or guard, depending on what the theme of the week is. So we have like a curriculum which is approximately 19 weeks. I could pull it up, but it's like there'll be takedown. It was self-defense, but this is all the evolution thing that's happening. I'm trying to get through this first 20 weeks. using the ecological approach to the old curriculum, and Alex and I are already picking apart the definitions we have, the open guard, closed guard. They're out the window for us now. Like we had 2 weeks that we dedicated to unconventional guards, you know, because unconventional guards were, your tripod guards, your De La Rivas, but all of these fit under certain, it could fit under open. It could, and then it was like, okay, well, seated supine, okay, and so we're at the moment. I'm about to pull all that apart, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to make like 4 week, but I don't know just yet. So yeah, it's not as rigid as as I probably made it originally sound. The reason why I did the 20 is because I wanted to touch on all aspects, and I've noticed one of the beauties of touching on, if you consider that we were doing one takedown week at the start and one takedown week in the middle, right? So there's 10 weeks approximately in between these two, and you're teaching like the initial contact. It just, the beauty of the way having something where you're touching on it every day is now my guys are just, they're used to the chaos that is having to gain connection. They're used to that chaos, and so there's almost like a calmness to that chaos. And I don't even need to take anyone down as long as we get that first connection. For the most part, they've done what's necessary, and then the secondary part of the reasoning for doing that was so I could pull stuff in that we've recently done. So for example, guards from last week, unconventional guards, or even leg locks. So the goal would be to bring in something from, we want to get double enclosure of our thighs around one of their thighs. All right. So hopefully what this does is it brings back something from leg locks where they go, hey, there's a single ashy, and I'm trying to talk technique as well as the, more of a goal oriented approach, because that's the language for both camps, I suppose. And if I can appeal to the old IP versus, if I can appeal, Greg's already doing the abrasive thing. I can be abrasive, but I don't want to be. I really like Greg. I don't think he's abrasive at all. I think he's had to deal with so much crap where people just don't understand that, so I'm not sort of slinging anything to him. He's gone on, he's done more for getting out there than I could ever try. So I'm glad that he did that, because I don't know as much as him. So, I don't need to be abrasive when I'm doing this. But yeah, so I think, I kind of lost where I was going there.
Talking about touching on everything all the
Oh
time.
yeah. So the make it stick, the visualization, the imagery. Imagery is apparently the better terminology for it. But that book, Make It Stick, again, I think that's where I came. Greg recommends that book as well. I'm sure you've probably read it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I audiobooked it for sure.
Audiobook, yeah. Interleaving. So leaving a bit of space and then having to retrieve that information helps you solidify it. That kind of thing I'm trying to bring into class as well. So I don't know what the optimum length of time in between is though. But again, like, there's been circumstances where, I'll be doing a particular game with one of my guys, and they will be doing something from 2 weeks ago that is part, like, that I've, quietly sort of thought, okay, we'll do this. Hopefully they get this, but they'll also have some other affordances that they can do, and they'll do the thing that I hope that they would, but didn't think that there was a high probability of, and then they're doing it, and I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Like, that's something that we went through a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and now he's putting it into play here. And I know that he's never done that before because he's told me he's never done that before. You
Right.
know, so yeah, and again that 60%, I think it's more. Um, the 60% is more just here's our theme. The bulk of the lesson is going to be this. And we want to touch on the other two in some way, shape, or form. Usually, it's one or two games. I like the standing to start off with, because the cardio is different. It engages the entire body. I one of the black belts that I did his class on Saturday. It's the first time I've been able to get to a Saturday class. So because it was Easter, there was no kids classes in the morning, so I didn't have to take my son in and all that kind of stuff. So I got the chance to do his class, and I did a brief review of his class a couple of days back. But Chris, he's been a black belt for a while, and we introduced Eco to him probably around the same time, but he really sort of dug into it probably just a little bit after I did. So it was cool seeing where his interpretation of it went, the track that he went down. And so his was like, he started off like hard in the theme. And it was like the way that he set up the games. There was way more timed ones. There was this, there was that. And so I started sort of going, okay, I'll take that and put it in, it evolved as I sort of, I went, oh, would I do it that way? No, I probably wouldn't. But that actually, that was actually really good. I was actually surprised at how intense the session was, because, I mean, maybe it was because, it had a bit of chocolate the day before or whatever, but the intensity of the session was quite heavy, to go straight into with that grappling cardio, or that you know not having the warm up with the stand up first. So yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's really interesting when you get a chance to do someone else's session, and
Mm,
sort of see what you can pull from it. Because there's so many things that actually even can like influence the intensity. Man, you have a big room, lots of people in there. There's naturally
mm,
just more energy running through that room. You start going at a pace of the group next to you, or like, there's also just like there's probably less intervention by a coach in a room with a lot of bodies. Whereas when you're running a more intimate, smaller group, you can really adjust a constraint, build the next game
mm.
out. You can have so much more involvement. Um,
Yeah, I saw I watched that lesson that you put up on YouTube, where
mhm.
it's kind of top down. That was really cool. And yeah, I can't imagine, like, you obviously you've got to keep an eye on a whole range more people. I mean, that's something that I hope to have a problem in the future, as I grow. But yeah, how do you manage that? Do you find that, or do you have a couple of other people that kind of assist at the same time, or do you find that you've got that relationship where they can shoot back a question when it's appropriate?
So generally, I'll have like an assistant coach on the mat for the majority of the sessions.
Cool.
Just something we've always needed because weird pairings, whatever, those type of logistical things to help that run smooth so I can focus on running the practice.
Mm,
But when it comes to like what their role really is, more often than not, it's calling win conditions and calling attention back to what's most important. That's sort of
mm,
like what their primary task is. And really, even for me, a lot of my like interaction during the games is really pointing people out to the wins and like asking questions of them or reminding them like how can you get their head off your chest, or
mm,
those little points of like urgency. Yeah, but the assistant coach, it does play a pretty decent impact because we all know how sometimes meaningful like one little piece of redirection can be that you hear, right? And it just allows us to make sure that's happening way more, especially when you're dealing with an all levels room. So I can have people who don't even know what a guarded scenario is, then I have black belts on the other side of the room. So to help manage that, we found that to be super useful. But yeah, it's interesting. Sometimes I'll just run the whole session myself, and to view and keep up with the room isn't that hard because you know it's way different when you think of like the old days where like, oh, we're trying to get all these people to do this technique. Now it doesn't really matter, right? The ugliness is okay, the chaos is okay. It's encouraged even. So then it just becomes, hey, can I be making sure that people are staying within the parameters? Not necessarily that I'm trying to like take the fun out of it, but I want to make sure that they stay in the zone where they're going to get the touches of what's most important right now.
Yeah.
And that I find lots of times, more often than not, is one of my major tasks, is keeping them playing the game as it was, more or less set. Sometimes I let things go if I can see that it's like a meaningful exchange that's about to happen and they need to see, how that influences what the primary task was. But that's a lot of what I find I'm actually up to when it comes to like my active role running a larger room when, there's 30, 35 people on the floor. Like, tends to be more of that than anything because we don't really get a lot of questions on the go. I've sort of like conditioned my room to ask the questions after class, and they
Yep.
have to be specific. I
Yep.
need you to tell me a situation you were hitting. What was the problem? What was happening to you that stopped you
Mm.
from doing the thing you want, right? Rather than just like, so it's really cool. That's like I guess a big emphasis of mine is I really do try and coach my students on asking better questions, on being able to like do that part of their training well. Because I know for me coming up, I would say a lot of my progress was because I asked questions and I didn't know what to ask, but people guided me to ask more specific things to really, you know, be intentional in that way. So for me, one of the big things I try and pass on is like, man, ask good questions. And people ask me shitty questions all the time. I'm like, I need you to be more specific. What is the problem that's happening, or what is not happening that you think should be happening? How come? Like it's an important part of you, so you can help them.
Mm. Well, one thing I sort of like I liked out of that session that you did was your language and your goals that they're going for was so very direct, and it's something that I can find that I sometimes the task that I'm setting, I can make it a little bit muddy, and I have to sort of step back and say, hey guys, don't worry about any of that. Uh, Here's the goal. Your goal is simple. This I had so one of the Aaron, who's often in the same class as me, let's say my assistant in some of those classes. I'll let him look after other classes as well. But Aaron will sometimes be like, and then you can do this, and if you put your hips here, and I'll be like, well, like don't worry about that. The goal is this. The goal is to do this, and I think over time evolving the my own language, I've had to think of how I can make that so specific that I don't have to I don't have to sort of even demonstrate. I think there was a bit of a discussion about demonstration with Ed as well. Like some people will demonstrate some stuff. I'll be like, hey, you're in mount. My goal is to do this or this. However, like my goal is to get my legs around this leg or my legs around this leg. Doesn't matter how I do it, you know? And I think the questions that happen after, well, as I said, after a lot of the games will not every single one, but after some of the games we'll have an insight session, like, a couple of minutes where it's like, what did you get out of this? What did you feel? How were you affected? And those times, sometimes a question will arise. Do you think, like, do you find that ever happens, or do you have those insight sessions? I suppose with a big class, you don't really get that opportunity, do you?
Yeah, we don't really do like group feedback in that way. I do have like one session a week where I tend to have a smaller group, mostly more on the novice side, and more what I'll do is I can sort of see what's going on. So we'll play more iterations of a game with a new task focus, just, playing in that way.
Mm.
But I will sometimes be like, hey, what's been the biggest challenge in trying to hit this goal?
Yeah,
And they'll
okay.
describe it, and then I'll try and point them back to, hey, what is the mechanical thing that they have to make happen to actually help them with whatever's happening, or what is this like the focus that they're losing sight of? They're not actually
Mm.
focused on maybe keeping this person at the right distance, or the right distance, but at an appropriate distance to help them achieve whatever. It's something that I think is definitely valuable, but one tricky thing is, like I sort of talked about this, is most people don't really know what happened. So when they try and tell you what their challenge point or what was going on, they're usually wrong. I'm not sure if you, but like they're usually off on what they
Yeah.
thought they were doing. Like I had a student once who told me, like, oh man, this guy just like benched me off of side control and then he Kimured me. And I was like, let me watch the footage. And I watched, like, no, he put you in a Kimura from the bottom and reversed you over with that. Like, you can totally miss what really
The
happened,
setup. Yeah.
and it's, so like a lot of times, like I try and put the onus on me as much as possible to see what's happening and how can we push or sort of move that somewhere it needs to go. Um,
Absolutely.
something you touched on. I really wanted to circle back to. Lost it. It'll be forever gone. It's in the mist.
You will remember it after
Yeah,
the
of
session.
course.
uh,
Anything else that's really exciting you right now about coaching, or where your coaching's going, or things like that, Sam?
I think there's excitement and there's nervousness. I mean, I think I want to learn more. This is one of the most exciting things. Is I feel like I'm learning way more than, um, one of the things over the last few years is I was training 5-6 days a week, um, you know, and that's as a 42-year-old or as a 40-year-old with two kids under three. I've got all this stuff going on. I've got two side hustles, all really putting it and still getting into training. And in the last 3 months, I've plugged more holes in my game than in that entire time. So, like, I feel like I'm learning so much that I want to keep learning. Um, the nervousness, I think, comes from what could potentially happen in the future with the stuff we discussed before with regards to the sort of the franchise and where to go from there. But it doesn't really matter. I think when it comes down to it, just that thirst for knowledge is reignited, and it's ignited in a way that there's an academic part to it that I never thought I would. Well, I always wanted, but was never interested enough in something to be able to sort of immerse myself. So now that that's there, I'm like, yeah, let's go. What else can I learn? That's why I'm
Hmm.
asking. I really like that stuff about culture. If you've got anything any sort of literature or and the biographies, I'd be keen to get any recommendations off you there because I never really thought of that. I'd looked at a couple of things around that, but for business, so I run a digital marketing agency as well. So I've looked at it before from a business perspective, but this isn't really a. I mean, it's a business, but I'm looking at it from the community perspective, if that makes sense. So if
Yeah,
you've got
Matt.
anything, let me know.
Absolutely. I'll send you some after this. Just I'll take a second and go through my little library and see what really stood out to me. Because there's so many books that touch on that stuff in different ways.
Mm,
There's holistic program stuff, like how do you develop a program that has meaning and impact. And there's things about,
yeah,
in just the training room, how do you do it there? And, every level in between. So I'll definitely shoot you some stuff, Sam.
that'd be awesome.
Um, yeah, man. This has been a ton of fun. It was sort of cool to talk to someone who is young in their overall coaching journey and sort of
Yeah.
hopping in, and seeing what you've been thinking about and sort of how you've really been fairly intentional from the jump about wanting to be good at coaching. You're doing this review, you're doing the literature, you're trying to reach out, trying to engage.
Mm,
And especially in an organization where, like, you have the control to really sort of steer the ship a little bit and see what you can make happen. I'm sure you've been seeing the net positive.
mm.
So thanks so much for sharing all that. I've had a ton of fun. Any last things you want to try and add in here?
I just wanted to say, like, yeah, it has been awesome. I really appreciate you having me on. I kind of there's an element of nervousness because I'm talking to guys that have, a significant amount more sort of mat experience, I suppose. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time myself. I've fought mixed martial arts as an amateur. I've been doing this since 2009. Well, doing jujitsu since 2009. So I'm not early on in my journey
Hmm.
as a grappler, but then I see that you've got these high level guys where I'm like, I see that Ed Ingemel's is on, and I've been listening to podcasts with him on, and just going, Jesus, this guy's like, I've got to. When are you releasing this, Kabir? Because if it's immediately after, then it's a hard act to follow. So, overall, like I just think reaching out and just trying to connect and learn as much as I can in the space. I really appreciate you having me on. It's been a good honor, as Bernardo says, great honor for me. So
One thing that's really important though is like if we're gonna get better, people have to get comfortable having conversations that they think that they, if you gotta think you can be in every room and have every conversation because everyone's gonna
mm,
pull a little nugget from here or there or just there's things that you're thinking about that maybe I have forgotten that I wouldn't even think about just because of the length of time or all these things. So I always find like every conversation has so much value, no matter what
mm,
you think. There's
yeah,
value here for
definitely.
sure, Zeb. It was fun, a lot of fun. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
really
man.
appreciate
Again,
it.
thank you so much. Yeah, I'll go ahead. I'll pause this bad boy, and we'll be all set.
Awesome. Thanks, Kabir.
Perfect.
Cheers.